All right, welcome to the Creation to Cashflow podcast. On this podcast, we discuss strategies to maximize your creativity and help you achieve financial freedom. Hi, Michelle.
Hello, Nicholas.
How's it going?
I've never called you that. I don't know why I decided to do that. It's going great. I'm humbled. I learned something in acting class, and apparently, I have this tendency to not talk with the full depth of my voice when I get excited about things. And one time, my sister was like, "I really like this podcast more than all the other ones. Your voice sounds deeper." And then now I know what she means because I go back and listen and I'm like, oh yeah, my voice is kind of annoying. So I'm working on that, but I'm humbled and I bring that up because it's like we always want to continue learning and growing, right? And also it's something I'm working on. So if you listen to this, I know Nick's voice is like a story time. You would listen to it to like fall asleep or do yoga, but I'm working on my voice. I just want you guys to be aware of that.
Thank you. That's the nicest thing anyone's ever said about my voice today. Uh,
Just today.
just today, so far. We'll see if that stands. Anyway, we have a great episode today. We're going to talk about creative problem solving. I feel like if you have good creative problem solving skills, I truly couldn't imagine you ever being bad at anything. Like to me, I don't want to sound like the most like egotistical person in the world, but like I'm one of those people that like I could pick up a new thing really quickly because and like solve problems quickly because I'm just a good creative problem solver. And I don't know if that's sure some people are probably born with that. Some people probably have to work a lot harder and develop creative problem solving skills, but to start this episode off, I want to talk about a creative problem that I had to solve the other day. So on Thursday, we record these on Wednesday. So on Thursday, um, my job was to smoke a brisket on a wood smoker for 12 hours. And I woke up at about 7 a.m. to start this because the goal was like to have that done for like 7 or 8 p.m. to watch the NFL draft with some of my friends. So at like 7 a.m., I woke up and I go to turn on my smoker, and there's a little like auger inside of it that wasn't working. And it's like what pushes pieces of wood into the part that burns and creates the smoke. And it took me about 2 hours and 45 minutes to get my smoker working again. And I had to fully deconstruct the entire thing and like redo and unplug all of the electrical components. And it was like the most insane, frustrating task in the world. And I just remember thinking to myself, there is no one else on this planet that I know that would go through all of this right now. They would just be like, okay, we're not having brisket. Like, we're not going through all this. We'll put it in the oven and do it like the shitty way. And I'm pretty much a certified electrician in the state of New Jersey at this point because of how much electrical knowledge I now have when it comes to smokers. It was insane.
Wow. See, I thought you were going to be like, so I ordered from a local place that makes great brisket. Because that's what I would have done. I would have been like, you know what? Let's just solve this problem by finding somebody else to invest in because they're doing the smoker thing. And I'll do my DIY one a different day.
I live very close to a Home Depot. I almost went and just bought a new smoker. And I was like, no, 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 no. And I took a picture of it fully deconstructed. And later on, because I took that picture getting ready to send a picture to my friends and be like, I can tell you one thing, we're not having brisket today because look at this thing. It is just an electrical mess. And and I sent that picture to them later with like a 1 minute voice memo, and I was like just walking them through how miserable this was and how I was like, I will never ever give up on anything. And actually I got it working, and we're gonna have brisket later. And just know that I went through absolute hell for all of you. And turns out the brisket was a little bit dry anyway.
Oh, no.
So
I was going to ask, how did it turn out? Hey, at least you did it.
I was supposed to smoke it for 12 hours and I only got like 8 to do it now because I spent so long trying to fix the things. And then I had to rush it. And I'm no pro smoker anyway. So all of that to say though, like I was on YouTube, I was using all sorts of different tools. Some of the screws were stripped. Like I had to solve different problem after different problem. And I won't get too into the details of it, but like if you just have that like I won't quit attitude and I will figure out like how to solve these problems, you can find your way through anything.
Absolutely. I remember one time my timing belt broke in my car when I was under a bridge in New Orleans. My timing belt, if you guys don't know what that is, it's a very expensive piece of the car. It's not easy to change. And I was like, you know what? I need to figure out a way to do this. So I researched on YouTube, figured out how to do it. My dad helped me a little bit, but I changed my own timing belt in my Mitsubishi Eclipse. Like I figured out a way to do it because I couldn't at the time afford to hire somebody that knew how to do it. YouTube is powerful. I mean, this video is on YouTube, and I just like there's so many ways to figure out a way to make it work, even if it's not your ideal first choice.
Yeah, it's true. And even still, like even going a layer deeper than YouTube, because like there was no video on how to do this on YouTube, but there were videos about like how to take off this part of the assembly. And I'm like, okay, so like that's a piece of the information. And now I can get to the next step. And it's kind of like the episode we talked about just like figuring out what is your constraint right now and getting to the next one. Like my first constraint was that the auger was clogged with pellets from like a few months ago. And I was like, okay, I got to clean that out. And then I clean it out and try it again. And I'm like, it's still not working. Must be something like electrical. Then I take all the parts off and I'm like, oh, this thing wasn't plugged in. And I plug it back in. And then sparks fly. And I'm like, well, that probably doesn't go right there. So now what's the next thing? It's just like, just next problem, next problem, next problem. And at any point, you could always give up and quit, but then you don't ever get to the end goal.
Yeah, and that's life.
Yeah, that is life. So, first thing that like what I always try to think of and recommend, like when I'm like, okay, what would I tell a friend who's struggling to solve this problem that I'm struggling to solve? Like, just like remove yourself from the situation entirely. Like, I'm trying to picture if one of my friends was in charge of smoking this thing and they're like, the auger's not working. I thought it was clogged. I cleaned it out. That's not it. I'd be like, well, you got to take everything apart and you got to look inside. And like, that's just what I did. And I was like, oh, I don't want to do that right now. It was 45 screws. And half of them were stripped. It was a nightmare. And then I got it open and I'm like, I'm just pretending that I'm on the phone with a friend and they're like, okay, I got it open and I see what looks like a bunch of jumbled wires. And I'll be like, you got to go on YouTube now and figure out like what wires are supposed to go where. And I just pretended I was walking someone else through it. And 3 hours later, it worked.
Wow, that is so not relatable to me at all because I would just be like, buy a brisket from somewhere local. What? Like, what? Because that's also another way to solve a problem, right? There's so many ways to solve these problems aside from giving up and being like, we're just not having it. There are other, well, maybe, I don't know about New Jersey, but I know at least in Texas, every corner has fresh smoked brisket. I'm obviously in LA. I don't know what it's like here, but I love that you said that because it's like your way of solving a problem for a friend is different than my way, but at the end of the day, we're both giving advice, which you should take with a grain of salt. But I love that point because I do this. It's mostly with mindset things though. With me, like whenever a friend or not a friend, whenever me, myself, and I have a problem, like a fear of moving to Los Angeles or buying a Tesla. When I wanted my Tesla, I was like, how can I get this? This is like so far out of my reach. And I was like, okay, I'm going to save up $100,000 in savings in addition to what we currently have. How can I get that money? How can I get over my fear of having to purchase such an expensive car back when it was like at the peak of its price? So there are ways to solve problems, not even just financially, but also mentally. Like a lot of people's bottleneck struggle is they need a therapist. They need to unlearn some things that they've learned, habits. They need to change their habits. They need to change their lifestyle. They need to reframe their perspective on things. And I need to reframe my perspective on things. And so when I hear myself be afraid of something, when I take myself out of it, and I look at the big picture and I think like, what piece of advice would I give my friend who's afraid or my friend that wants to buy a car? That's what I would tell them. I'd be like, okay, let's make a list of all the ways you can make the money to get the car, or let's make a list of all the things you're afraid of, and then let's find out why you're afraid of them. Let's get you a therapist so we can work through some of those limiting beliefs that you have in your head right now.
Yeah, it's the way you see problems is, like, where it all begins. Like, when I had a full-time job and I was like, "I need to quit this job," I had to totally, like, revamp my entire way of thinking so I could start to, like, see problems as opportunities for growth, and, like, that's kind of how I look at everything now, and that's why I'm like, I don't know anyone else that would go through all of this. Like, I could go next door to Home Depot and buy a new smoker for 300 bucks probably, and not even have to clean this one after, because like it was just in, like, there are other ways to solve these problems, but I now see problems as a challenge, and I'm like, oh man. Another really good example of one, I don't know if I've told this story on the podcast. When I was in Puerto Rico in May of last year, about 11 months ago, there was an old fishing pole with old line and old lures, and I was staying at like a beautiful place on the water, like on like an intracoastal waterway, so there's lots of fish and things. And I, like, the equipment was just not set up for me to succeed. But I was like, "Oh, that's gonna make it that much better when I catch a huge fish." I probably spent 25 hours, like, during this week fishing. Like, everyone else in the house would wake up and they would just see me outside sitting on this dock with my feet in the water, and I've been fishing for 2 hours already. And I would also fish, like, up until midnight, and on the last night, it was probably 11:30, like, we were, like, leaving the next day. I was in Puerto Rico for, like, almost 2 weeks, I think, and on the last night, I had, like, the biggest fish ever, like, bite this lure, jump out of the water, line snapped immediately, like, my fishing line broke, and, um, and I was like, "Alright, well, that was probably 25 hours wasted," but, like, I felt like I solved the problem, you know, like, it was a challenge, and I beat the challenge. Like, I was like, I practically caught this fish." Like, it was like 3 feet in front of me, and someone else was standing behind me and saw this all unfold, and I was like, they're like, "I'm just so happy you saw a fish," because everyone else was like, "Would you just give up?" And I'm like, "You guys are making me wanna do this even more." But, like, the fact that you want me to quit makes me wanna do it even more, and I just see everything in life as a challenge, and sometimes that comes back to haunt me because I put too much time into a challenge. But anyway, all of that just to say, like, love problem solving.
Yeah, I mean, it's fun. I know that we talked about like where happiness comes from, and it's like something to look forward to is where true happiness lies. But also, whenever you see a clear way through this challenge, that you're gonna get the goal. Like your example is so simple because it's like you want to catch fish. You need fishing pole. You need to get the fish on the pole and you need to reel it in. That is a very clear picture of how you're going to achieve this goal of catching a fish. And it's like the challenge of getting that is almost the funnest part because it's like you don't know when it's going to happen, but you know how it's going to happen. And it's the same thing with life. Like I've always known I was going to move to LA, and I was like, there's no way I will ever move to LA. But in my head, I was like, I know it's going to happen. I know it. And I've always dreamed of living in a high rise apartment. Same thing. I was like, I know it's going to happen. And right now, I'm going through a huge fear because there's this penthouse. I really want it. It's so expensive though. And the thing is like I had to tell myself, Michelle, if your friend was going through this, what would you tell her? And to me, it's like an investment because I do content creation for a lot of furniture and home finds. And I love my neighbors and I love having them over. And I want 2 bed, 2.5 baths. And it's the biggest square footage in my entire apartment, like the biggest unit that there is. And in my head, I'm like, what else would I spend that money on? I don't have the desire to travel. I Yes, I can invest this for my future, but I feel like this is an investment for my future to get more brand collabs or get whatever. Like I see why it makes sense to me. And so I had to get myself out of the whole like okay, am I really going to spend that much money? Like, what if TikTok gets shut down? That's a lot of income that's going to go away. Like, there's so many what if scenarios, right? But at the end of the day, it's something I feel is right. And I see a clear goal to my next step in life of creating content and having a whole room that's like bright and everything. And so it's one of those things where it's like, I need to get over myself and stop letting fear take over whenever I know it really does make sense, like internally.
And yeah, that's why I really like the like what would you tell a friend analogy, because like your friend, you're usually talking them like you're usually explaining to them like why their fears are stupid to be thinking about right now. But like when it's you trying to solve a problem for yourself, it's very easy for your brain to go into that dark place of like here's everything that could go wrong, and very quickly things spiral out of control and you talk yourself off the ledge when you might have had like a great opportunity. So it can be really, really impactful to just like try and remove yourself from the situation entirely. Like pretend you were just like lifted up out of your body and you're looking down on the situation from like 20 feet above. And you're like, okay, now I can kind of see the whole picture in front of me. Like, what do we have here? What's going on? What are we afraid of? How do we solve it? Are these fears even logical?
Exactly. And it's a good way to take your emotion and your personal bias out of it. Although we do have gut and intuition, right? And I think that a lot of us know what we need to do, but we're too afraid to do it because of the what ifs. And I do think it's important to look at best case scenario, worst case scenario, but focus on what is the best outcome from this. And is that in alignment with what I want my life to look like and who I want to be as a person? If the answer is yes, if it's going to get you closer to you being more confident and thriving and loving yourself and loving those around you, do it. Because that's how we're supposed to be in life. We are supposed to thrive.
Yeah, it's true. That was really inspiring. I don't even know what to say back. I was like, oh, I needed to hear that real quick. That was nice. I recommend everyone go back and just re-listen to that, the last few seconds there. Michelle, have you ever heard of the book 10x is easier than 2x?
Yes.
Have you ever read it?
No. I've read the synopsis and I've heard so many TikTok videos about it, but I've never read it myself.
Okay, Mike is reading it right now and just keeps telling me to read it. And I've just been thinking about the title of it a lot, and it's really helping me. I haven't even read the book. I just know the title of the book, and it's it's already helping me so much. So I'll just explain to everyone. I'm going to send you a copy of this when I buy one, Michelle, because you sent me a book recently, so it's my turn to send you one. But anyway, the book is called 10x is easier than 2x, and what that means is like essentially what we're talking about right now. Like right now, if my goal was like I'm making, let's say, $150,000 per year, just hypothetical. If I want to double that, it's like, okay, how do you double something? Like, you got to work twice as hard. You got to find twice as many hours in the day. You need twice as much manpower. But, like, how do you 10x that? And when you start thinking in, like about 10x instead of 2x, you're pretty much being asked, like we just said, to like remove yourself from a situation entirely and just look down on it and be like, how can we do more without just like trying to double what we're doing? Like how can we completely change things in such a way where we can now do 10x? And this doesn't just go for business, like it could go for anything. It could go for bodybuilding, it could go for whatever your thing is, because everyone's always thinking in doubles and in just like trying to double what they're doing by doing the thing twice as much. But when you start thinking about like how you can use some leverage to like how can I really multiply what I'm doing? I think that's crazy. And I have been rethinking a ton of things in my own business. And I've already had some massive breakthroughs. But what do you think about this, Michelle? 10x being easier than 2x?
I love it. I'm all about work smarter, not harder. And the thing is, thinking of doubling what I'm doing is just not possible right now. I cannot double what
Right.
I'm doing. I can't. Yes, I have a team now that I have and they help me, but the thought of like just doubling the work I'm doing, especially because I'm in acting again, like acting takes time to even make money if you ever do. And so it's like, that to me isn't a possibility. So I just need to reframe what I'm doing and rethink what I'm doing so that way it will be 10x. And it's gonna come from not working double as hard, but from having an entirely different strategy altogether.
And to me, it's just crazy because it's perfectly said. You're like, I couldn't just do twice what I'm doing. Like, I'm already maxed out. But like, you could probably 5x what you're doing. Like, if you really step back and, like, thought about it, like, you actually, Michelle, like, you probably could. Like, I'm sure there's a way, and you're smart and creative enough to figure out how to do it. You might not want to because it might not align with your goals, but it's just so cool to think about how, like, it really would be harder if you were trying to double what you're doing than if you were trying to, like, multiply it. Because instead of just trying to do everything 2 more times, like, you're instead like, "Wait a minute, we need to totally revamp things."
Yeah, it's true. I mean, I know we've talked about this in the past, but I am gonna probably hire a video editor soon, especially because I want to be moving soon. And so I want to produce more videos and I can't just keep editing everything myself. It's just not like I know that there wasn't only one of me made. I know that there are other people out there that can do my similar editing style. And it's like in order for me to grow, I do need to have people on my team that are able to do those little niche things. And so I think that goes in alignment with 5X because I do think that could 5X my income because I spend so much time editing.
I gotta figure that, is that like the biggest task, like for you? Like when you just look at like how many hours I spend doing stuff per week, is that the biggest one?
And that's all I do. Everyone else handles all the other stuff for me. I just edit. Like that's my life is spent editing, which I love doing. I'm not gonna just stop. But I don't handle any of my emails, any of my DMs, any of my comments, like all that's taken care of by other people. I don't do any of my finances. I don't do any of that. Filming and editing. So filming and editing, I do still do product research because I need to know like what do I want to buy. So I do scroll on like Amazon and TikTok Shop. But yeah, filming and editing. But I'm gonna still film because I need to be in the video. But I think I can handle somebody else doing the editing.
That right there would, like, you really could 5x with just something like that. Like it really could be that simple, and I think that's crazy. Um, there's so many good examples of this, but like it's the challenge. It's really hard to step out of the box. That is the challenge. It's really hard because whatever, like, whoever's listening to this, whatever your thing is that you're working on or working towards, like, it's probably on your mind all day long, and you just have a certain way of like, I know how I can get closer to this thing. Like, I'm going closer to this goal. Removing yourself from that temporarily is very, very hard. One of the best ways that I have found is to go take a trip elsewhere. Because if you're in your same environment where you're doing things typically the same exact way as you're used to, how are you going to just totally have a change of thinking pattern? Like, it's not really going to happen. You're conditioned to just like wake up, do the thing, do the thing, do this thing. I know I got to do this every Friday, and boom, like, and the months fly by. Sometimes you need to step totally outside of that environment and like unplug from all the noise and really just sit down and think about like, what can I do different?
Yeah, go get some quiet time. I used to go on retreats every year and like with Evan, and we would just basically like figure out like dream, like what do we want our life to look like? What are our goals and everything? And it's just nice. Even just taking a drive an hour away and going somewhere where there's just like even going to a hotel in your local town, like just get out of what you're used to, out of that environment, get in a new environment and quiet your mind. Like don't get on social media or anything and really just like sit and dream and listen, be in silence. It speaks volumes.
I love that example. I did this on Saturday. I made sure I had zero calls, not a thing to do. And I sat, I think I put on an hour long meditation and just laid in the grass in my backyard. I definitely got a little too much sun during this. Um, but I just like the entire day, I was like, I am fully going to just unplug from everything and not just like enjoy myself, but like also think about like where am I heading? What am I looking for? And like just needed to remove myself entirely from what a typical day in my life looks like. Like I was like, I need to totally change this up. And I feel like I did a lot of really good thinking and planning. And I was like, oh wow, like I think we're all capable of this and we just don't give ourselves the space to do it.
Well, that and like what do I want? How can I get it? I think that goes, I mean, it's just creative problem solving. A lot of times you can't be creative if you don't have space in your head for creativity. And so there are things people want, and there are ways to get those things. It's not impossible, but you need to allow there to be silence so that other things can take up that space. And I think that it's really hard to do, especially if you're stressed out in life. It's really hard to just be in silence. Or if you have kids, like it's not an easy thing to do, but it is so essential.
And I think it's so crazy how just like a 12 years ago, like before everyone had a smartphone, like the world was so different. Like 12 years ago, if you go to the bathroom, like you might see like a stack of magazines like near the toilet. Like because and I mean sure that's like a form of distraction, but it's not as overly stimulating as a cell phone. Like you could look at a newspaper or a book or a magazine. That is not the same as a phone at all in terms of like distracting yourself and overstimulating. But like it's crazy how much harder it has become over the last few years to just find time to think. Like everyone is on their phone constantly. Like when you're driving, you just look next to you and you're like, they're texting, they're on the phone, that person's definitely sending an email. And it's like, it's just so, I don't know. I think that's so crazy. And like the next generation, they will never get to see what life was like before all of this. Like they're never going to have, like, I see so many iPad kids. Do you know what iPad kids are? Okay. What are I'm so scared of that because like at least as a child, like until I was probably like 12, like I don't think I even had a cell phone.
I had one in fourth grade, but the thing about the iPad kids, I don't know what I'm going to be like when I'm a parent. I want my kids to play outside. I want them to be communicating with other kids and everything. But I am aware of why sometimes it's so much easier for a parent to pull out an iPad at dinner if their child is screaming and they're like trying to have a conversation. And it's just like you can't really align with the 2 year old. You know, they only have a 2 year old's mind. They can't just be perfect in public. And to think that they could be is ridiculous. And so a lot of people pull out the iPad because they want to help spare everyone else around them. And so I don't know what I'm going to be like. I used to always say, I will never, ever be an iPad kid mom. And then I have, nieces and nephews, and I'm now like, oh, when I watch them, I'm like, oh, I get it. I get it. I do want to stay connected to my kids more than anything. But I think that if they're watching something informational, like Miss Rachel, there's this lady named Miss Rachel that just like teaches me things. I'm like, even I'm learning. I don't know. Maybe I'll be that way.
Yeah, Miss Rachel's great. But anyway, I'm I really hope my creative problem solving skills come into play there and I don't become like I don't want to have iPad kids. And everyone like in our we're from the same generation, right? I mean, we're 90s.
Yeah, 93.
That's how that works.
I guess.
Um we it seems like everyone in our generation says that. They're like, I don't want my kids to have the same access to technology that we do because we all know how like damaging it can be if you're not careful, like if you don't follow the right people and things. Like I try to clean up my social media feeds frequently so that I'm not just getting dosed with like, I mean, Instagram. I don't trying to be a man on Instagram and TikTok is hard because you get flooded with like hot young girls constantly and it's like I have to like not interested, like it's insane. And just how many other things, like it's just like, oh, like it's trying to show me these like tempting things and I'm like, no, no, not I use the not interested button like crazy
Wow.
to try and just like keep my brain clean,
Wow.
and it's very hard.
I didn't even think about that. Anytime I go to Evan's like explore page on Instagram or if he's on it, it's only like camouflage guns and like cars, like every time. And I'm always like, how is your algorithm so manly? Like I don't get it. But he also doesn't ever post content. And so I guess it doesn't it doesn't have a lot to work with besides like military stuff. But I didn't even realize that maybe that's something that you guys like come across, because that I would hate that. Even me as a female, I'm like, I don't want to see all that. I want to see like aesthetically pleasing furniture. But that's true. And even though I know like young girls, especially Gen Z, struggled with body image issues because of social media. And I can't imagine having to go through that as a kid. Like if I had body image issues because of social media, that's so traumatizing. So I do hope that I can use my skills as well as a parent to just really let my kids know how beautiful they are, just not shielding them from knowledge, because I think that that just no communication creates, they can come up with their own stuff. They're going to find out about things. I mean, I found out about things when I was super young because my older siblings. So I just hope that I can also use creative problem solving to figure out how is the best way to do this. Maybe by that time, there's like really good books and stuff out there that'll teach us.
It's true. And I guess that's one of the last things we should hit on too is like one, just like books and things. Like the information is out there. We have no unique problems at this point in life. Like we have no unique problems. The information is out there, but sometimes you have to get creative to find it. Like for example, when it comes to like health things and holistic and natural living and healing and things, like you gotta dig deep because like the US wants you to take medicine. But like if you want to like self heal from something, like you got to dig, you got to figure out like where do I go for this information? And you might have to go leave the country and go to a place and like study and learn from people. And that brings me to my point of like finding other people to help you creatively solve your problems. Like us, like we kind of like we match, like we kind of have, I don't want to say opposite skill sets, but like our skills complement each other. They kind of are opposite skill sets, I guess, right?
Yeah, yeah, and that's the thing. I could never do a podcast without Nick because he handles things that I just couldn't. I wouldn't make time for.
And I could not edit, I could not edit our podcast like the long form. I couldn't do it. Like give me the other things. Like I will manage our team members. I will do all of the other stuff. I will outline what we're going to talk about and make sure that like we're on time. And like these are the kind of things where it's like sometimes you got to find your person to help you solve your problems.
Yeah, we used the analogy on Monday how the dodgeball court. Do you want to talk about that real quick?
Yeah. Honestly, you could explain it though. I think you did a great job explaining it, but like we kind of summed it up to like our brains being like a dodgeball court. And Michelle, you could describe how you see yours and how you see mine.
Well, Nick was just saying, so I'm really good at spitting out a lot of creative ideas, but they're all over the place. Like my brain is constantly like, I there's no strategy or streamline to it. And so I see my brain as gym class when you're doing a dodgeball tournament and there's just red, disgusting, foamy balls flying all over the place. And it's like Nick comes in and his court is calm and clean and nothing is really like there's no throwing of red balls everywhere. And then he comes in and he's like, okay, we're gonna take this ball and we're gonna put it on this line, and then this one's gonna go right next to it. And it's almost like it like our skill sets together create this podcast.
Yeah, it feels like mine is just like someone having a catch with a friend.
Yeah.
You know, just like I throw it to you, you throw it
It's like
back.
one ball, and mine's like 20,000 balls running all
Right.
over the place. And we're like, which one do we grab? And Nick's like, this one.
Yeah, yeah. That's exactly how it feels when we outline the podcast too, just so everyone kind of knows what goes on behind the scenes. But anyway, all of that just leads us to say like your ability to solve problems, like you might not be great at creative problem solving, but if you can get good at that, I feel like there's nothing in life that you can't do. And I mean, there are books and there are things, and I will continue to recommend these things for people. But like just having an understanding of like the way you see problems and think about them is the first step. And I think that's really what we want everyone to take away from this episode. And if you're looking for more ways to monetize your creativity and find more freedom in your life, subscribe so you don't miss the next episode. Leave us a rating. Find us on Instagram and TikTok. I'm at Get Ahead with Nick, and Michelle is at Michelle JH with two L's, four E's, JH. And thanks for listening.